All right, welcome to another edition of the Franklin Community High School Career Exploration Project. With us today, we have Brent Fox, and Brent is the campus pastor at the Franklin campus of the Emmanuel Church. So Emmanuel Church, which is located in Greenwood, I believe. Brent, is that correct? The main.
Yes, our main campus is located in Greenwood.
And then they have one campus in multiple locations, is what they say, and one church in multiple locations, and so Brent is the campus pastor at Franklin. So Brent, why don't you just tell us about some of your roles, responsibilities there, and then kind of how you got to Emmanuel?
Yeah, absolutely. So just kind of a quick background. So I've actually been a pastor serving in ministry for going on about 20 years now, actually. And I am originally from Columbus, Indiana. And so my wife and I, so I'm married. We're getting ready to celebrate our 20-year anniversary actually this summer. And we have 4 kids. And we moved to, I think it was back in around 2015 or so, moved to this area from another church that I was at, and found Emmanuel. And when I first came on at Emmanuel, I was the connections director there. So I would help people at any of our campuses kind of take a next step, help get them connected, whether that was in a group or serving in a certain area. And then I moved into the campus pastor role here at the Franklin campus, actually around, I believe it was 2018, sometime around there, and have been in this role since then. So my position itself, so as you mentioned, we're one church with multiple locations, and my role as campus pastor is to oversee everything that goes on through our Franklin campus specifically. So that's with our staff here, that's with the congregation and the people that attend and call Emmanuel Franklin campus their home, and as well as just kind of connecting with the community and trying to build relationships, with different people in the community to be able to grow that as well. So that's it in a nutshell, as far as a quick overview of what my role is. If we want to get in details, I can get into that for sure, and I think you may have questions about that as well. So, but I'll just kind of leave it at there for right now.
Okay. So how did you, I guess, what's been your training, your education in order to get kind of into this role?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So part of the ironic or interesting thing about my story is when I graduated from high school, my counselor asked me a question maybe that you ask students as well, and what do you want to do? And back then I said I wanted to have to do with math because that was my favorite subject in school, and make a lot of money because that's what I was driven by. And so they said accounting or finance, and I was like, okay, I think that's what I want to do. So so I actually went to Indiana University for my undergrad and was double majoring in accounting and finance through their Kelley School of Business. And then things started to change when I came into a relationship with Christ. And after being in that relationship for about a year, I kind of felt the call to go into ministry and had no idea what that meant. And started to realize it had not as much to do with math and definitely didn't make a lot of money. So I ended up graduating with my bachelor's degree in finance. And then I went on to seminary because that's kind of the direction as I was exploring what this was all about to be a pastor, was kind of the best next step for me. And so I have a master's degree in Christian education. And while I was going to seminary, I had served in a student ministry pastor role at a church, just to kind of get my feet wet, to start to learn a little bit more about how to do ministry and what it was like, in addition to getting the educational portion side of that as well.
Now, I don't, I guess I'm trying to ask this in a way that's not like, trying to make it seem like the church is necessarily a business, because I'm, my beliefs, I believe it's clearly much more than that.
Sure.
But did your background and your classes in business kind of help you as far as like a management and then understanding like the finances and everything of the church more.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because at least through the classes that I took, the three main ones going through the Kelley School of Business was, operations, finance or accounting, and then marketing. And all of those things are used in the church organization for sure. And especially in the role that I have now, I use all of those. And so those core classes were definitely a help to me to kind of understand how, because this is an organization that, is ran. There's money involved, even though we're nonprofit. That there's people that tithe and give offerings and things of that nature, and we then try and help other people with that, in addition to salaries and wages that are paid, and then just the organizational structure as far as to how to run an organization and the church. It's not just, a lot of people kind of look through the lens and think we only work on Sundays, and there's a lot of other things that go in during the week. As an organization that we do. So, and then the marketing aspect too, is, just trying to allow people to get to know a little bit more about who we are, and what we do and what we're about is kind of marketing. It's a little bit different than a business strategy because we're not, selling a product per se. But we do have something that we stand for and why we exist, which is kind of how marketing plays out in the church realm for sure.
Yeah. So you said, once you got into a relationship with Christ, you saw that it was kind of your path to go down was the ministry. Yeah. Was that kind of a moment, or was it gradual that it got you?
I would say both. There was definitely a moment that I started to. So the summer, kind of bit of my story is the summer before my freshman year in high school, I was in a bad four-wheeler accident. Almost lost my life, and I had grown up. My mom and dad had brought me up and grown up in the church, and so I knew that God was real, but didn't necessarily have the relationship yet. And so when I had that accident, and I felt like God saved my life, and I felt like it was for a reason. I had no idea why, and so I had made Him a promise at that time to say, God, I'll do whatever you want and need me to do. Well, 7 years passed. From that accident. It happened on August 1st on a Saturday, and August 1st, 7 years later, was on a Saturday. And those last 7 years of my life during that time, and later high school, early college, I had not done anything near the direction of God. Made a lot of very selfish decisions, and got into kind of the party scene, if you will, and just kind of did my own thing. And so I realized that. That was the moment I started to realize, like, I'm not heading in the direction of anything near what would be pleasing to God. And so I started to explore what that meant to be in ministry, because my parents are not in ministry as far as being a pastor. And so I just started to have conversations with pastors and with other kind of people that served in full-time ministry positions, in a church setting, to ask what that meant. And so really it was over the course of a year that I was just trying to figure out, like, how does this play out? What would that look like for me? What do I need to do, and things of that nature for sure.
Yeah. So with your job, obviously there's so many pros that come with it, but there are also some downsides with it. You got to work Sundays. So, yeah. So what are some of the things that you just absolutely love? And what are some of the things you're like, yeah, I could go without that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll start with the out that portions. I mean, you mentioned one of them to a certain degree, as far as so as pastors, we are kind of on call 24/7. It's not a 9-to-5 job where you clock in and you clock out, because we are in the midst of people's lives, and they don't shut off, after 5 and before 9. And so, we kind of have to be open to that. In addition to, working, I mean, I work pretty much every weekend. So it's not like we get weekends off, per se. And so those are some things that, if this is something that someone's considering, definitely have to put that in context, as, whether or not they're willing to kind of make that sacrifice. the there's a lot of kind of the tough part of it is, I have come to enjoy this, but I know one of the tough things is, you as a pastor are in the midst a lot of times of people's struggles and hardships, and that's not fun. Whether someone is going through cancer in their family, or there's a divorce that's happening, or something, abuse of some sort. We come in and are getting calls to kind of step in the middle of that, and just kind of come alongside. The good news about that, for me, that I enjoy, and why I feel like I've stayed with it for so long, is because I enjoy coming alongside people, and just kind of loving them right where they're at and helping them. But it is a weight, that we carry as a pastor. In addition to all of the things that are already going on in our lives and our families' lives, we carry that as well. And so there's just a heaviness to being a pastor that can be really, really difficult. And sometimes it can be too much of a burden for people to carry. But those are definitely, I think, some of the kind of negative or tougher things to navigate through in ministry. Some of the things, again, that I love, as I mentioned, is just being in the midst of people and helping them kind of take a next step. So I get to see growth of all different kinds, and I love that. And I also love, the other thing that I love is building relationships with so many different people. Whether, and usually of all ages. My role and responsibility here at our church is mainly, adults. But I served in student ministry as a youth pastor for several years prior to coming into this role. And just, I loved that too, so kind of get involved in the lives of students, high school, middle school students, and just kind of loving them where they're at. So those are kind of some of the things. There's as far as time, I mentioned 24/7. If you're responsible, that also gives you a little bit more flexibility in your time though too. As far as to flex some hours out, if for example, like I do like premarital counseling with couples sometimes, and most of the time that's in the evening, so I can kind of flex some hours out throughout the day if I need to, because I know that is going to be a part of my day and week and things. So at least at our church, that I think is a positive thing, to be able to allow flex hours, to kind of make schedule accordingly. Obviously you got to get a job done, but I think seeing the kind of light bulb go off in some people's hearts and their minds, especially, obviously our focus is on people's faith, and helping them our mission at Emmanuel, we say, is to come to Christ and grow in Christ. And so whether it's that initial step into a relationship with God, or you taking a next step to grow, is very rewarding, for sure. So I think those are some of the things that definitely come to my mind when I think about, both positive and negatives of being a pastor in ministry.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, you've got all those negatives, but it's all, or the positives, but there's also, you've got to be on a lot of the time. You've got to be really on. So what do you think is personality-wise makes you or someone successful in this role of a pastor or ministry leadership? And what do you think would make it so where they're probably like, oh, they may not be as successful in this role?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a few things that come to my mind, and I'm sure there's more than what I'll name here, even in our conversation. But one of the things that comes to mind definitely is patience. Being patient where people are at. We have a tendency, at least I do. I think a lot of people are like me in that way, but have a tendency to want to have this goal and idea of where people should be, and decisions that they should be making in their lives. And one of the things as a pastor that I've learned over the years for sure is, having patience meeting people where they are, and being able to help them, walk with them to take that next step, whatever that is, even though, you think they should be further down the way. It can ruffle your feathers and get you, kind of caught in a bind if you kind of keep getting ahead of where they actually are. So kind of being patient, I think, is one. Being empathetic is definitely another one. Being able to know how to relate to people, because sometimes we can have this kind of vision of ourselves, or think of ourselves more highly than we are, or ought to. And so kind of empathy puts us in a perspective of seeing the person that you're talking with, or persons that you're talking with, and helping, kind of putting them on an equal playing field, if you will. And that I think, to go along with that is, especially in a position as a pastor, there always has to be hope. Mm-hmm. There always has to be an understanding that there's always hope for someone. Again, both from a perspective of, from religion, and being able to have that opportunity to enter into a relationship with Christ, as well as grow in it, even if, again, they're not where you think they should be, or even sometimes where they want to be. I think that's where patience and empathy comes into play as well. Is people always, have this lofty goal of where they want to be, and they're not always willing to put in the work to get to it. And the disciplines that it takes to grow. And so being, empathetic and hopeful that, man, you can still get there, is, I think, important, because if you don't believe in them, sometimes like they lose belief in themselves. And so, we are definitely hope bringers and givers, as pastors in people's lives, because, like I said before, you meet them in hard places where they're struggling, and sometimes they don't see a way out. So we definitely bring that to them as well. Definitely, I think it's a given, but like being a follower of Jesus as a pastor is probably top on the list for sure. And one of the reasons I say that is because of this. You're getting, as a pastor, like you're diving into the deep end of standing up for what you believe. And you're doing it as a living to, not only like be in church, but to be able to proclaim it, and help it move forward. And so if you're not kind of all in with your faith, and it doesn't mean you have everything figured out, because I'm in no way, shape, or form perfect, but willing to take that stand, then I think that's a huge part of getting into ministry, as far as, full-time and being a paid staff person, because you are standing up for it, because you are a representative of the faith, and specifically for us, Jesus and what all that means in the Bible and everything of that nature. So that's why I say that, is that means that, sometimes that means that in our society, and in our culture, that means that you could be different, because of what you believe and what you think. And sometimes it could even mean outcast. So you have to have kind of broad shoulders to be able to receive what other people think of you because of that. And be willing to still move forward in, carrying kind of the faith torch, for the church, type thing, if that makes sense. So,
yeah, absolutely. So as far as a career in ministry, how would someone prepare for that? How do you think?
Yeah. So there's a few thoughts that come to my mind for that. I definitely think, talking, as I mentioned before, a little bit what I did, talking to other pastors and people that are on staff at churches, I think is helpful. I think trying to find ways to serve. There are all different kinds of mission trips, both locally and globally, that are available. And I think mission trips are important because one of the things, that we do, especially as pastors, is we're constantly serving other people in so many different ways, shapes, or form. It's taking on that role as a servant to different people. So I think that, as well as there's, lots of even nonprofit organizations in our community, in I think pretty much all communities, that people can volunteer in and step in to take time to serve and kind of get to know a little bit of not only like how to serve, but how the organization is structured, and how they make that work. I think is really important. and then I think, like getting in for my role specifically as a pastor, I speak to people in different group settings. So sometimes small groups, sometimes large groups. And so I think that, going back to that other question, like to get in that role, you have to be comfortable in getting up in front of talking in people. So even taking like a speech class, I think is very helpful to understand, not only to get up in front of and talk to people and kind of maybe face a fear of being in front of people, but knowing how to put words together so that you're communicating in a way that makes sense and is relevant to the crowd that you're speaking to, and either not above their heads or below them, where they're checking out. It's really tough. I think that's one of the hardest things probably of my role is when you have a large group of people, especially because there's so many at that point kind of places where people are, as far as in their faith, where they are in life, and the lens in which they see things through. And so to try and meet every single person, it's hard to put together a talk or a sermon, whatever you call it, to hit every single person. And so I think, some sort of a speech class definitely helps you start to think through what that could be. And how that could be like. So, and then there are, I know at our church, and I think at other churches, there are internship opportunities as well that students could get plugged into. And it gives you a way just to kind of get your feet wet and try it out and see before you kind of step full blown into it and find out like, man, maybe I don't like it or it's not for me. Internships are definitely another great way to be able to kind of start to see a lot more of what goes on behind the scenes. Because again, most people only see what goes on, at a weekend service or Sunday morning, and there's a lot more that goes on behind the scene that kind of internships and even volunteering for different roles. Because I would even say volunteering in your church too would be another great opportunity to kind of learn what it means to be in ministry and a pastor.
Now, as far as your, you mentioned just communicating in a way that gets through. So I take it that you don't solely use the King James version of the Bible.
That would be correct.
That's kind of what I figured.
Yeah.
The last one, we're going to get you out of here on this one. You've got just some general advice for high school students. Doesn't have to be any kind of career advice or anything, just general advice.
Yeah. One of the things that I used to, so like I mentioned to you, I was in student ministry for a while. And one of the things that I would always tell parents of students is, I'll kind of adapt this to students only, is, you get one life to live. And so be intentional in how you live it. Because I think a lot of times, we just kind of happy-go-lucky, if you will, through life and kind of try to maybe hope that it goes well and not plan accordingly. And so I think it's important for, I would have loved for someone to probably help say something of this nature to me when I was, a high school student. And that is, being able to be consistent in disciplines in life. Whether that's in faith and reading Bible and praying and things of that nature, or just consistency of being a good friend, or a consistency of, being on time, being there for others, things of that nature. I think that one of the things I told them is like consistency compounds. So as you do it over and over and over and over again, you'll see the intentionality of your life take shape over the course of time. Things don't usually change in a matter of minutes. And so I think keeping your eye on the goal of, where you want to be in life and doing the disciplines consistently over and over to get there, I think is a huge win and success for your life. Even if you don't fulfill all of the things that you want or desire, I think consistency is one of the things that is very helpful to know that, you're fulfilling your purpose, even if you don't fulfill all of your potential.
Yeah, absolutely. Just doing the same thing, making sure you set solid habits and you keep those habits throughout time. Very, very good advice. So.
Yeah. I think that plays into, like, to wrap that up, I think that's what creates your character, and your character is one of the most important things that you have in life, because it's your reputation, it's your influence, it's your ability, to be able to have other relationships with people, because they'll either say yes and move forward with you, or no, based on your character. And I think your character comes out of the consistency that you have.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Brent, once again, thank you for joining me here today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Brian.
Yeah. Brent Fox, campus pastor at the Franklin campus of Emmanuel Church.